All right, so this evening for this iteration of the Suited Shootist video, um, I'm actually recording it on my tablet as opposed to on my phone, um, just because I'm apparently having some storage issues and I wanted to make sure that I didn't run out of space just in case this video ran a little long. So if the quality is a little bit different, um, that's why. So as I'm filming this is fresh off the heels of the lobby day that took place in Virginia on Monday. And after watching some of the live feeds, there were a couple of things that I thought bore mentioning. One thing that I want to put out there right up front is that overall, I think that the lobby day in Virginia was a net positive. What we saw was a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different states banding together in an attempt to send a singular, cohesive message. And I saw a lot there that I liked. Um, Now, one thing that I want to say right out front is that this is in no way meant to criticize an individual or insult anybody. I'm operating under the assumption that everybody that was out there was operating in good faith in an attempt to put forward the best message that they knew how to convey. That's not to say that there weren't some potential areas of improvement, just simply from the standpoint that I think there are things that sometimes either get glossed over or dismissed within the gun owning community that we don't necessarily put enough importance on that I think deserve to be highlighted. And one of the things that is kind of the tagline of the Suited Shootist page and blog are the overlooked social aspects of the armed lifestyle. And typically, when I touch on that, I'm talking about that in terms of how to navigate social situations as it pertains to your tool set. But a lot of that has to do with communication as well. Now, one thing that I definitely think we can improve on is is I'm calling it social literacy, and it's kind of this combination of the verbal agility that Craig Douglas talks about in terms of managing unknown contacts, in just being adept enough, both intellectually and verbally, to navigate and possibly restructure, reposition yourself um, as a scenario evolves. It's a combination of that along with Tanner Guzzi's social literacy, being able to read and or anticipate a social situation and adapt yourself and your presentation so that you're not sticking out like a sore thumb. Um, One of the things that kind of struck me as unfortunately amusing was there were a couple instances during interviews of different folks during the lobby day where they would start off by encouraging other people, presumably directed at the folks that are anti-gun, that they need to think for themselves, and then would immediately transition into the same kind of tired talking points that we hear belabored over and over and over again. The reality of it is that nobody is going to change their mind because they heard a bumper sticker read in your voice. You know, uh, you ain't Morgan Freeman, you ain't James Earl Jones. You're not that compelling that just because it's you delivering the thought, that's somehow going to magically change somebody's mind. It really is important to identify who it is that you're talking to. because even amongst people that oppose gun ownership, they fall into multiple different camps. And it's really important, I think, that we delineate that. Um, I kind of break the whole audience into three groups. The first group is the people that are already on our side, the people that believe in the Second Amendment, believe that it is an individual right. Don't bother talking to those people. They're already on your side. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't communicate with them and figure out how to kind of condense the message and maybe kind of brainstorm. But especially when it comes to speaking publicly, it doesn't make sense to speak to that audience because you already have their support. So then when it comes to the opposition, that still breaks down into two separate groups. You've got the people that are just so staunchly entrenched in an anti-gun mindset that they're likely not going to ever come over to our side. They either have personally had a negative experience related to firearms, in which case it's just a visceral reaction that you're going to have a very hard time overcoming, or they've just bought into whatever the traditional anti-gun talking points. I'm not saying that it's not worth talking to those people, but that's best done on a one-to-one basis with somebody that you may know personally, because there's a personal connection that's already there. The reality is that they are already way over on the other side of the fence, and they're already prejudiced. So you're going to have a very hard time offsetting that. If you're going to try, it really helps not to fit the caricature that they already have painted in their mind of the gun owner. And I say that sitting here as, a chubby bearded white dude with tattoos. I fit that mold pretty well. So it can be a very challenging thing to overcome if you're talking about somebody who is just staunchly anti-gun. Now, there's a third category that I really think is where we have the potential to make the most headway. And that's this, what I like to think. Now, this is my opinion. I have no evidence to back this up. But I have to believe that most of the middle ground exists in an area where the only reason why they think that they are against gun ownership is that they're just not suitably educated. It's coming from a place of kind of the true definition of ignorance. They either don't have a personal dog in the fight where they don't assign a real importance to gun ownership, and all of the anti-gun rhetoric seems reasonable to them on paper. So they just are kind of like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I certainly don't want people to die. I don't want people to get hurt, yada, 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 yada. And they haven't given much consideration to the flip side of that coin. However, those people are also very easy to alienate, and it's very easy to discredit yourself in their eyes, especially if you start throwing around epithets like snowflake or libtard or Hitler. That just makes you look like an emotional asshole that doesn't have a strong intellectual argument to stand on. And so that makes you a lot easier to dismiss because you're playing into the caricature that's been painted. Another thing is that gun owners, we have a tendency to want to be really pedantic and mince words about bullshit details that don't matter initially. You hear people all the time kind of pulling the well actually as it pertains to clips versus magazines, assault rifle versus assault weapon versus modern sporting rifle. Who the fuck cares? If somebody is using that terminology, you know what they mean. So demeaning them intellectually or putting them down to a point where you're basically trying to flex your intellectual superiority and making them feel stupid for using that language ain't gonna win you any friends, and it's likely going to cause them to shut down, paint you in a negative light, and likely just going to not open the door for any progress. And lastly, the other part of it is that when it comes to the discussion of the Second Amendment, we need to keep it about the Second Amendment. It's not about anything else. Invariably, any of the people that I saw interviewed invoked arguments about abortion or invoked support of the Trump administration. Neither of those things are particularly germane to the Second Amendment conversation. And what it communicates is this underlying expectation that if you subscribe to gun ownership, then by association, you then must ascribe to support of these other things. It ain't necessarily going to work that way. There are Democrats that support gun ownership. There are folks that are pro-choice that support gun ownership. There are folks that support higher taxes that support gun ownership. And regardless of where you stand on any of those subjects, would you rather have them be on your side as it pertains to gun ownership? Or would you rather write them off and drive them over to the opposition because they don't think just like you? And the reality is that we need as many allies as we can get. There's no such thing as too much support when it comes to gun ownership. So I don't see a benefit in tying all these other ancillary things along with it as this kind of Trojan horse of overall conservative values. It doesn't fly. Not to mention the fact that, aside from that, you hear the, oh, well, if they're offended, that's their problem. While that's technically true, what you've done is evoke an emotional response that shuts them down, and they're no longer receptive to what you have to say. And, just like I was talking about that caricature that exists, the more diverse we are, the more we're able to challenge that false image that's being painted of us. So again, it can't hurt. The last thing that I'm just going to touch on very briefly is, you saw a lot of folks out for Lobby Day that were displaying long guns. There's different schools of thought on that. The folks that were in civilian clothing wearing long guns, personally, I think had a greater impact than the ones that were in full kit, to use the common terminology. I'm of the opinion that if you're going to be threatening violence, that kind of implied suggestion of wearing the full battle rattle, you're trying to coerce people into siding with you out of fear. I don't see that as an effective long-term solution because they're only going to side with you as long as the threat is there. And if you're appealing to the base survival instinct, you're not engaging their rational brain to where they can actually come around and appreciate your perspective as it pertains to gun ownership. Now, again, that's just one guy's opinion. I know there's been a lot of feedback on both sides of the equation in terms of that. But at the very least, if you're going to wear professional gear, it needs to be worn professionally. Just like when it comes to a suit and tie. It can be the exact same suit and tie on two different people. One person looks like they're going to court as an attorney. The other person can look like they're going to court as a defendant. If you're going to wear it, just make sure that it's worn in a fashion that communicates that you know what you're doing. And at the end of the day, when it comes to this communication, do you want to flex up on people and make sure that everybody around you knows how right you are? Or are you more interested in advancing the message and actually winning and gaining ground? So that's really the thing that we need to focus on is let's focus on gaining ground more than anything else, because at the end of the day, you just have to be very careful not to talk faster than you can think. And it goes for them as well. You want to make sure that your message is keeping up with their thought process.